Hi, this is Sarah. Thanks for listening to my show, Meant for More Conversations with Sarah Ali Moore, where we explore our greatest potential, the call to serve, and leading heart-centered change with full authenticity. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Meant for More Conversations with me, Sarah Ali. And tonight we're going to be exploring this amazing talk that MacKenzie Roebuck Walsh created about really understanding the power of women in the workforce. The name of her TEDx talk, and the link is in the description area of this talk today. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at her TEDx talk, please, at the end of this discussion, click on that link, listen to her talk. It is incredibly empowering, filled with a lot of information that is eye-opening, thought-provoking, and is such a change agent for the kind of change we need to consider when we think about the future of the equality and equity that we all, seek to have when it comes to the workforce, the diversity, the inclusion, the empowerment, and to have a way of which our careers and our working world are in alignment with our values as a society. And I think that's what's really at the heart of MacKenzie's talk, is that it's really being mindful on the way that we each have these values in our own personal lives that we aspire to and that we hold. And really, how are we living those values forward? And how are we creating and manifesting those values within our society? And so I'm really excited to have MacKenzie tonight and to dive into this conversation around making your career your guilty pleasure. I love this title, Making Your Career Your Guilty Pleasure. So if you all would help me welcome MacKenzie. Hi, MacKenzie. How are you tonight?
I am awesome. So excited to be here with you.
I'm so glad you're here. So MacKenzie is the Senior Director of Retail for Comcast West Division. And all I hear from you, MacKenzie, is just amazing feedback about the work culture that Comcast has, and really rallying behind the message that you're presenting, which is around really empowering the workforce for women, pay equity, work-life balance, and removing the guilt trap that so many women fall into when it comes to having to support their families, but also really loving their career and wanting to do that to support their families. So I'm really excited to dive into this talk with you. First and foremost, you just did a TEDx talk. How does it feel?
Really, really incredible. I am blessed. One of my superpowers, I like to say, is public speaking. It's something I really enjoy and seek out. But there is something so powerful about the TED stage and ensuring that you're bringing an idea that's worth sharing to the table. And the experience of TEDx Women Cherry Creek and the foundation that they build to help bring your story forth is like none I've ever experienced before. This was actually my third TED Talk. And it by far was the most in-depth and personal experience. And I think really created a narrative that's jump-started for me the need to continue to speak about making your career your guilty pleasure. And I'm just really glad to have the time today to go a little deeper with you.
I love that. MacKenzie, when we first met each other, we had a conversation about going out there on the stage. And I remember you saying, you're like, oh yeah, I can't wait. You were just totally relaxed about it. Meanwhile, I'm like, kind of hyperventilating inside, but trying to act very cool. Like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to be fine when I get on that stage. And you cracked me up because you're like, oh, I have no problem. I could speak in front of crowds of thousands of people. I have no problem at all. Not even, doesn't faze me one single bit. And you weren't the only one. Now was the other speaker who I spoke to. She's like, I could talk in front of the multitudes. I have no problem. No fear, nothing. I was like, are these the two I've never met unicorns like the two.
Oh my God. She's so amazing. But I will say, don't sell yourself short. You are very cool, calm, and collected. You were ready. Oh,
thank you. Thanks. I thank Candace for that. Candace, she can pep talk me behind the stage. Oh my gosh. Okay. So MacKenzie, why this talk? Why now? I mean, and pretty precedent. Did you plan this, MacKenzie? Did you plan this talk for this time right now?
I did not, but I am so glad it aligns with stars. And I think it's going to be amazing to having, as you and I were prepping for this, talking about having a female vice president and like what that does, and one that's a mother and a proud mother, right? And I just, it's so important. And as you'll hear in my talk, I was raised with this topic. My mother is a glass ceiling breaker, and my mother is a woman and a great mother, and she did it all. But for me, what really caused me to give the talk was that anyone that knows me, and if you look at me up on LinkedIn, you can tell I am a driver's driver. Ambition is my middle name. I love work. 10-hour day is a short day, and that's okay type of woman. Mm-hmm. So I naturally thought that after I had my baby, I would enjoy my maternity leave, that I would be running back to my career. Right. And I had friends who were like, yep, maternity leave's great, but like, get me back to work. I really thought that was going to be me. Right. And I had such an opposite experience. Uh-huh. I cried every day. I did not want to go back to work. I would come home and like, I know that I can't quit, but I need to quit. And it was really hard. And then over time, my son started sleeping, and I stopped breastfeeding, and these hormones that are related to being sleep deprived, as if you were in some sort of torture scenario. Right. And having this little human being that looks so much like you, and you being its only source of food, like both of those things go away. And when they did, I was so thankful for my career. And like for 2 weeks over Christmas and New Year's, was a full-time parent. And I was, after that, like, get me back. Like, wow. All I want to do is go to work. So that was really, when I had that experience, and I thought about, God, if it's this hard for me to go back to work. Yeah. But then this rewarding once I get to the right place. Mm-hmm. There are other women going through. And how can I shine a light on what they go through? Mm-hmm. And just as a society, I loved what you said in the introduction, like, where are our values? Mm-hmm. And if we value family, if we do value inclusion and diversity and women in the workforce, to address that, America doesn't show it in our maternity policies and paternity. Right. And, right. Because the other thing I didn't say is I have probably one of the best situations possible, right? I'm a senior director with a Fortune 50 company that has amazing benefits. Right. I have a husband, like, I have all this. Mm-hmm. And if I've got it the best and I'm still struggling, we've got to bar up for what is the best, and we've got to get everybody. Such a good point.
Yeah. I've always find it so surprising. You know, I don't have children personally. I don't know that I ever. There's something about. I'm like, oh my God.
The world needs aunties. I'm an amazing mother, but I also am a big fan. The world needs aunties.
Oh my gosh, I totally fit that bill. I'm an auntie to many. But it's like it's so interesting when I think about just the trauma that your body goes through, right? The getting acclimated to parenthood, and the needs, and you know, this change, this mass transition, and then being like, all right, got to go back to work. It's like, it doesn't make any sense to me why we don't have more support. Fortunately, we live in a state that is a bit more progressive than some other states in passing, you know, maternity leave, and you know, my organization where I work offers paternity leave, and it's you know, it's a move in the right direction. And what we were talking about earlier is that, and yet it's still not quite enough. It's not enough. It's not enough.
Yes.
And it's like, how do we get people, you know, and I don't know if it's, you know, how do we shift that understanding or this position that we have in society of like, you know, you just go back to work and start recognizing the need and the importance of that time to bond with your child, the time for mom to really move through this transitional period of life and the trauma that she's gone through and having children. You know, like, how do we create a you know, some forward movement in society to understand why this is important?
Yeah, you know, we are a capitalist democracy, and I am a businesswoman, and I think that there is a good business case for it, honestly. And so we need to do two things. We need to talk about it more. That was a big part of my talk, and in prepping for my talk, a lot of the women, like, we don't talk about the trauma. Right. We do show up, and I showed up every day with a smile on my face, and I gave it my all. And I was not like, oh gosh, guys, like 2 hours of sleep. And, you know, yeah, to your point, my body hasn't felt even close to what it usually does. And like, that's not what we do. We come in and we say, I'm here and I'm going to get the job done. And no, nothing traumatic has happened to me. Maybe we talk to a girlfriend in the bathroom about it. Maybe lunch with another woman on the team and we talk about it. Like, we certainly don't bring it forefront. Right. And that's where I think the women start to drop out. And for me, the business case is in stopping women from dropping out. I think the average American now has like 2 kids. Maybe it's like 2.3 or something.
Right. But it was 2.5. Now it's 2. Whatever.
It's right in that 2 kids.
Right.
If we invest in everyone getting a year off, probably 2 years of my salary, right? And, or even a portion, pay me at 80%, right? I can understand why that's difficult, but it's still not a huge number compared to what it costs companies. Take, you know, we'll use me as the example because that's the easiest. My company has put me in leadership development programs. They have done countless year-end reviews with me. They have, you know, this, and this. It all adds up to an investment in me as an employee and a long-term investment, right? Right. And if I can't make it through that rocky middle ground and I choose to leave the company, it's expense to replace me, quite frankly. And I think if we stopped and thought about it that way, one of the statistics I talk about in my talk as well, like, if you take a woman out of the economy as a working member, she's no longer, so this is the broader picture, paying as much into Social Security, paying income tax, and again, you may be supporting her as an American taxpayer for 1, 2, maybe 3 years, but be paying in for 40, 50 years.
Right.
If you come out, you're probably out for 18 or 20 years. Some women never return, right?
Right.
And if it's a conscious choice, like my sister-in-laws are stay-at-home mothers, they love it. They do a great job. I think that's great and that's needed too.
Right.
You're doing it because you are so overwhelmed and so broken when you get back to work that you just see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, that's unnecessary. We could have those women standing next to us, rising up in their careers and helping to close that management gap. It's another reason the higher you go, women just fall out of the apple tree like it's being shook really hard.
Right.
And it's because often cases, the burden is on us to have the child and then to be that primary caregiver. And what does that look like, right?
Right. Exactly. What does that look like? It looks like carrying it all and doing it all. That's what it looks like.
Looks like you need a spa day. That's
right. Like you need some self-care time. Yeah, exactly. And to that point in your talk, you mentioned the statistic about 1 in 4 women want to step back from the workforce. And what's driving that, what you're talking about, part of what's driving that is just the burnout, and not having that time, to really settle and then being able to dive back into your career in a way that feels like all encompassing and feels good and feels like a good next step to get back into that routine, which you love. But what's interesting is, what for women who want to come back into the workforce and who are struggling with making that decision. Are there ways that we can think about how they could support the vision that they want right now of going back into the career and being able to work from home? I think it's interesting the time that we're in with COVID and things going virtual, that helps. Which I have another question about that. But what are your thoughts about that as women who are like, I want to go back, but it's really difficult to handle transitioning back into work so quickly?
Yeah, I think that the work from home in that aspect has been a godsend.
Yes.
It has, because it gives you an hour or 2 hours of extra flexibility. It gives you time to fit into your pants. And just figure all of that out. But I also think we have to be careful with it because while it's great, I think, for new moms returning and a good option to do kind of a slow roll back into the office experience, it's so hard right now on moms whose kids are also home. And, you also have to be very careful because I think you can get this idea of, okay, well, I'm going to go back to work, but virtual, but keep my baby and not have backup childcare.
Right.
And that doesn't work either. Like, kids are crazy, they need so much attention.
Yes.
They don't get that conference calls come in 30 and 60-minute increments and that you're planning on taking a break at noon. That's not in their clock. And so I think it can be really difficult too when women think, okay, well, this means I can have it all. Right. And I can do it all this way. In fact, I have friends now who are like purposely renting office space so that they can step away from their house.
Yeah.
And have that kind of place. But I think the nuance as well is the expectation. And if I'm going to come into the office, like, there is an expectation when you're in the office of this additional kind of bonding time, we'll call it. It's the like, let's all stand around at 5:30 and do day, right? And if you're that person that leaves the office and walks by the group that's doing that, there's a stigma. And, you know, people are like, oh, it's never said out loud or rarely said out loud, but you get this idea of, oh, she's not as dedicated, right? And it's, oh, like, she got her work done and she's got to get out of here to go take care of a newborn. And those are the little things too, where I think we've got to just keep kind of recognizing.
Yeah.
Hey, like, this is awesome. I promise I'm dedicated, but I need to be more structured with my time.
Right.
Period in my life. Right. I need to make boundaries. And I think that's always my advice as well when I'm talking to women reentering is know what your boundaries need to be. Male executives have them too. You know, I've heard people as powerful as a CFO say, I always eat dinner with my family and I do it without my device. Like, people, an hour, you know, if a business can't run without me for an hour, we have much bigger problems. And me, it's that like 5:30 to 7, right? Cash bed at 7. Like that's nothing. I have to block that time and be with him. And I think having those conversations up front as you come back to work is so important. And just saying up front, here's what you can expect and here's what I can do. I do also say, Anne, may I please have a place to take a nap? But I'm not sure that would really help you with your mobility, but in my dream world, that would be thing to request.
I think it's great. Honestly, I'm a proponent of putting like sleep pods in every workspace. like naps help. I mean, there's something with, in Spain having a siesta. I think they're on to something there. I think
it's a big deal. Like even 15 minutes.
Right, exactly. Just like a quick power nap. Come on, just like 15 minutes is good. When it comes to the workplace, as you were talking, and the need for women, to rise, not only in women stepping back because of this transition and because of the burden of trying to support household and family along with career and all of those complexities. But you bring up this point about, forward mobility, upward mobility, right? Forward movement in your career. What are the ways that we can maybe dismantle some of the hardships that women face when it comes to upward mobility in their careers? And why do you think it's so hard right now for women to break through?
Yeah. Oh, that's a loaded one. I think there's, however, it goes back. I think part of it goes back to my talk and this idea of making your career your guilty pleasure. I was listening to a different podcast and they were talking about the fact that like women right now feel like I have my career, I have my relationship with my partner, and I have my children, and overwhelmed with those three. So something's got to give, and automatically it's my career. And I think that some of why that is, especially when women are earning more and more, and we are sharing the financial burden equally.
Right.
Because we put so much more guilt on ourselves, this mom guilt, right? And, oh my gosh, like if my kid watches a cartoon in the afternoon, I failed. My kid screams for a few minutes because they want my attention, but I have to finish this email. I failed. Right. And men, by and large, don't do that. They're, they say, hey, the time I give my kids quality time and if I need to like adjust in order to make my career work, like that's great. You know, no, just, you know, be quiet, child. Like, you know, daddy's gonna work. Like that's a very normal thing that I think a lot of us can really resonate with. And I think that it's important, again, to just say, my career is important to me. I've worked hard to get where I am and I enjoy it. And that's a whole nother can of worms. If you don't love what you're doing, like figure that out. But if you do love what you're doing, don't dampen that by starting to feel guilty that what you're doing is taking away from other important priorities. Because in reality, your kids are watching you and you're a great mom when you're with them. And, you know, if you're giving them more time on the weekends or whatever it is, you're scheduling family vacations and being focused like that. And they'll learn so much from you being a working mother. And be better as long as you can just say, wait, this is my fun time. You know, it's a little bit like working out. Working out is my me time, right? Like,
yeah.
That's the time when I just get to be focused on me. And I think your career can be a similar thing.
Right. When it comes to, you know, with you being in, you know, senior leadership, you know, women coming into the workforce, there's this, I don't know if stigma is the right word, but it's like as a woman who has family, right, and you're trying to balance work and home, and you're coming in for a position, there can be like this fear of, you know, can I express myself and my needs, right? And the need that I, you know, being able to communicate the needs that I have to be home with my children, or that that's a priority, or if something is coming up, right, with your children or your family that requires time off, things like that. As a woman who is in, you know, leadership and the change that we need in our work culture to support women more with this work-life balance, you know, what's the way that we can reduce the fear, right, of being able to express the reality, right, of being a working mother?
Yeah, I think you said it in the word stigma, and I think we create the stigma for ourselves. So first of all, we all need to start showing up about it more. And when I talk to my male colleagues, like they go to soccer games too. There are pieces that they pick up on the parenting front. Awesome job with. I think we can find more common ground there, and we can also talk about like, hey, this is what I've got to do. But I also think as a society, and this goes back to that sort of bigger picture, right? We are no longer a manufacturing society. In fact, we see that played out all the time in the political spectrum as we struggle to make sure that we've got these jobs that fit in, you know, what the American economy is built off of today. And so if I'm not manufacturing widgets, do I really need to punch in at 8 and punch out at 5? Like, is that, or if I punch in at 6 and punch out at 7, does that really prove that I'm the best employee? Or does that prove that I'm not being efficient with my time? Why are you hiring me, right? Like, you're hiring me because I'm a great leader. You're hiring me because of my ability to ideate and to strategize. You're hiring me because of my ability to drive people. And I think that we need to get real about when and how we can do that. And we need to punch the clock all the time. And still be super successful. And that's the other place I do see a lot of women drop out, is that they get so bogged down with the corporate culture of punching the clock when we're not manufacturing anything that, you know, they stop and like start their own yoga studios. They stop and they start their own consulting businesses. And that's awesome. And it gives them the flexibility. They're working just as hard, probably harder in some cases, but they've got the ability and win. And again, those are great minds that are leaving our workforce that we need to keep. And that flexibility of, it's not the number of hours, it's the output. What you produce with the time that you did work is another major cultural shift I think we need to continue to make.
Yes, that is such a great point. It definitely is a stigma. And you're right. Men do take that time off where they have no problems expressing their needs. And yet it's like letting go of that. When it comes to, women right now, I mean, that is such a point of like women being like, I'm going to go do my own thing. And, what do they call it? The boss babe movement is what I call it. The boss babe movement. And there is something to say for that, like, great, being able to create that flexibility and stuff in your life and what you want to do. And it's really about pursuing passion and flexibility in your career. How, like, there's a shift that needs to be made within the corporate world, right? Like the old structure, the old model, that's so rooted in the industrial, aspect of work. And that's not the world we're living in, especially with COVID right now. Because COVID has flipped everything over and been like, it's a new world. Yeah. There's a need for innovation. There's a need for flexibility. And what is a way that we collectively can rally behind that sort of shift or change in corporate environments to provide for that? Do you think that's just going to come because as the newer generation comes in? Because let's be honest, as a millennial, I'm on the tail end of the millennials, but it's like that. There's this idea of like, work needs to be this way. This is how we want it to be, right? Are we just waiting for like the newer, young, hipper kids to get in and change the culture? Or is this something that we can do now to start advocating for that innovation, that flexibility in the workforce that can help retain the power of women in the workforce?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely something we can do now. And there has never been a better time for it. Everything right now. So we've now very effectively proven our abilities to work from home and be very effective. And there certainly is, and I am starting to crave in-person meetings, but like, oh man.
Who else is done with Zoom? Come on.
We are not robots.
Seriously.
But when and how and that flexibility. And then I think we need to bring it into our diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation. Amazing conversations, at least in my world, around what is your experience, and let me learn more about your background and what you're bringing to. I love the idea of the mosaic, right? Like we're not a melting pot anymore; we're this mosaic, and talk to me about your color piece. But we aren't yet to the place where we're getting super actionable, right? And the actions aren't all have a diverse hiring slate. That's important. Yes, we should be doing that. But then how do we make sure that people are successful in their job and give them the space? And I love, the boss babes, right? And like, I'm constantly like, God, if only I had the courage to do that. Like, this is what I should be doing, right? But in all reality, it is a lot of hard work.
It is. And
the hustle is real, right?
The hustle is real. You gotta hustle. Yeah, exactly.
Like I love my health insurance.
Right, exactly. I was gonna say there's something to be said for benefits. Yeah, and stability in ways. Exactly.
Yes. And well, what can I do to still hustle within my career? And how to make the space and the encouragement? One of my favorite things about becoming a more senior leader is that there are people who want my advice, and I have the flexibility in my calendar to make room to help them and to help them grow. Right. And me, that is my own little like personal hustle, right?
Yes.
like finding this joy from helping other people grow their career, doing it as part of my work. I have a workforce indirectly of almost 2,000 people. And I get up in the morning to make their lives better. And I've succeeded when they get promoted. You can do that. Like, that's the power of corporate America. The number of people you can touch and the lives you can influence is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
But kind of lost, the trees for the forest, or however that analogy goes. When it starts to feel a little bit too much like a factory.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love that. That's incredibly inspiring, I think, too. And thinking about, how can you bridge into your career the passion that you're looking for? I love that. Now, when we're talking about leadership, in your talk, you talk about the pay gap, right, that exists between men and women. First and foremost, the numbers. I think you said for every 100 men, there's 85 women in the workforce. So it really
at the manager level. Yeah.
The manager level. So it definitely is male dominated. And then there's also the pay gap, right? Where it's 80 cents, about 80 cents to $1 for women. And then it's really interesting if you have children, which is not something I was aware of. That goes down by about 11 cents, I think is what you said.
Yeah.
And then there's the intersectional lens of that, whereas women of color, right, in the workforce, that those numbers
just throw another quarter out. Yeah,
exactly.
It's crazy.
out the door. And it's, how do we advocate for true pay equity for women, and not just with this lens of like for women, but really understanding the intersectionality piece when it comes to pay equity, that really extends across, right, for women, the body of women. And then I'd like to talk about, also in leadership, how do we get that? How do we get there? What are some of the, some of your thoughts on pay equity and the intersectional piece around that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think specifically and this was a statistic I also didn't know until I started working on this talk, was that working mothers' pay goes backwards while fathers' pay goes up, right? And it goes back to stigma. There's this thought that once you become a mother, you become less productive at work. And that's, again, simply not true. In fact, maybe I become more productive because I'm a better time manager.
Yes.
And I'm a people manager. Like the things I have learned about emotional intelligence in the first 18 months of my child's life are incredible. And I can apply that back to my work. So it probably does raise my value up. And, my line is that, now some women bring home the bacon and their husbands cook it, right? Like, like that was the other, like, Fred just had another baby. We better give Fred more money. He's got to support this growing family. You know what? Guess what? In often cases, Mary is also supporting her growing family. And like, she needs the raise to like make sure everybody can go to school and all these things. So I think that, but one of the best things I'm seeing, and we already talked about, you and I are blessed to live in the state of Colorado, where they pass parental leave. The other thing that they've recently passed is a pay equity bill. And that bill requires jobs in Colorado to be posted with their salary range. Why that's important is because statistically, women, when they are offered a job, are like, oh my God, yes, I will take it. Oh, I can't believe you think that I'm worth that much. Like, thank you.
Right. It's all hidden behind the scenes, and then they're getting undervalued and underpaid.
Yes.
Right. Compared to their white counterpart. Exactly.
Yes.
There's a problem with that.
Yes. And where you start is where you grow. Right? Not like when raise time comes around. It would be great if we did get here, but we don't today. We look and, oh, they all started at different places, so therefore let's give them raises.
Right.
We say, who cares where you started? You earned 3%, right?
Right.
And so that compounding also loses you money over time, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I'm earning 3% on $10,000 more dollars than you, then guess that grew. And when I earn my 3% next year, by the time we've been in the workforce for 5 years, I could be 10% ahead of you. We're getting the exact same performance review. And so I just love that we're now getting more transparent about what those pay bands are. And I think we need to continue to do a better job of also reviewing salary, not for, is this fair? Because it's easy to justify a fair salary, fair value, right? But is it equitable? How hard is MacKenzie working? What is she producing? People with similar titles and similar jobs, what are they producing?
Right.
And what are we paying for those results? Is it the same? Is it less? Is it more? And one of the really cool things we're seeing is that female CEOs lately have been doing a better job than their male counterparts negotiating their salaries.
We've had to get good at it.
And they're like, they're starting to kick ass, right? So, I think we need to continue to push people to or take your first offer, come back with a counter, really know like where you want to be and where you want to grow. And that will help because believe it or not, how much you get paid is also an indicator of how long you will stay with a company.
So true.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that this like 5,000 here, 10,000 there, it goes back to the like having too short of a maternity leave that you could be losing women. And thank God we do live in a time now where people are striving for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if you've got really good women, like, no, it's not so hard for them to go get headhunted.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And grow that way, right? Not necessarily ideal. I do believe in sticking with a company and really learning a company and building relationships and what that can do. And frequently, when you do see female leaders who have really gotten to pretty powerful places, like they are working their way up through companies. About the CEO of Home Depot, right? Like they start and they stay and they work and they build the relationships. And I know the second part of your question was how do we keep getting more women as leaders? And it comes back to relationship building. And you have got to have sponsorship and friendship in the room where the next decision is being made. And one of the things that drives me crazy is that when it comes to assigning mentors, we have a huge unconscious bias. And I do believe it's unconscious, but they will always say, let me put you with the woman. I, at one time, went through that and there were like 2 women available, right? Like 2 female VPs.
Right.
Of 20, female directors.
Right.
Like split them up 10 and 10, one to each.
The women with the women. Yeah.
Like, come on, no, like we need male mentors. And I've been very lucky. That's one example, but I have probably 5 examples of wonderful male mentors that I've had. Got to keep talking about that. And women, you need to go seek out people that don't look like you too. And
exactly.
the fact is, what we look like has so little to do with who we are.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, like, it's
like a cosmic joke. Right?
It's all about personality. So you need to go find the mentor that has your personality, and they may look totally different than you.
Right.
Help you, and you will form that connection. And I think that's how we continue to then say, hey, Sarah can do it, right? No, MacKenzie can do it. Let them into this and make sure that they're a part of the table. But it's definitely, I work in a subscription business, right? So you can either like gain customers or you can retain the ones that you have.
Right.
And we can't hire in enough women to close that gap, to get to 100 male managers for 100 female managers. We have to retain them. Mm-hmm. That's the only way we're going to close the gap, is to figure out how to retain. Yeah. It was a fun, complicated puzzle. Why we're talking today.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And I think it's, that point that you're making too about connecting to someone, right? The whole networking piece, being connected to the right people who can help you get to that next level. And this, this is a question that I think about when it comes to the corporate world, especially when we're talking about intersectionality. I'll be honest, when it comes to, Black Lives Matter, regardless of the controversy that people hold around Black Lives Matter and all of that, it has done really phenomenal things to bring forward this conversation around race, around intersectionality, around the need to really recognize, like, there's value, right, in diversity, and what do we do to help, improve or offer upward mobility, right? When we're talking about things like unconscious bias, because really I feel like unconscious bias is what's at play most. It's just rampant, but it's becoming aware of those biases. How, do you find in the corporate culture today, and and if you want to talk about your personal experience with Comcast in your work in the workforce, in really having a lens of understanding the need to make those connections happen, that when people are thinking about who do we want to, offer opportunities to, is there really a discussion around that intersectional approach, that need for diversity, and the value of that within the organization?
Yeah, I am so proud to say yes. It has been amazing to watch. We were already on a great path. We have employee resource groups, and they were very active and very well supported. And not only was attendance encouraged, but honestly, like, if you wanted to grow your leadership career, you've been engaged on the boards of those ERGs, right? And really working to lead them. And then as we saw all the things that happened last year, we just leaned in even harder. And we are having not like just one-off, hey, everybody get together conversations, but purposefully, how do we weave this into our everyday lives? And how do we make space? And how do we call ourselves out, right? And it's interesting because in my job, I'm on a mission to increase the diversity in our leadership, because I run retail, right? And so our front line looks pretty diverse. And as you come up the ladder, it gets thinner and thinner, right? And so, that's a very real world example for me. And I feel like I have the full power of my company behind me to do that, but to do it to fill a quota, right? Right. The other side of this coin, and what gives people a lot of anxiety, right? To do it in a thoughtful way. And for me, again, it's about looking ahead. Ahead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and saying, what do folks need to be prepared? My goal is to go prepare people so that we are fighting over talent. And it doesn't matter what you look like. I am a huge believer that your hiring slate, your candidate slate, must be diverse. That is the only way to ensure that we start having more diversity, right? But it also can't be just about like, okay, well, I'm choosing you because you're a woman, right? Right. Do anybody any good either? Because
like, you're a double minority, triple minority, right? Like, it's just like the layer, the pancake. Stop that. Yeah, exactly.
No, it's got to be because you're the most prepared and you've done the steps and you've been methodical about it. But we be forward thinking, because we haven't invested, and not everybody does start out in the same place. And everybody is born with the same amount of competence. And, corporate America has a culture where you need to speak your mind. Guess what? Not every culture is a speak your mind, and especially to your superiors culture.
Yes.
So you've got to train that, and you've got to encourage it and positive reinforce and work over time to build it up. And I do think that is just the most important part, is recognizing, again, this mosaic and being really thoughtful. That, hey, right now my picture's got just a little bit too much green in it, and it would be a much more beautiful picture if we added some blue to the sky and some flowers and some clouds, and really help it to be more successful too.
Yes. Yeah. There's definitely some forward movement as far as women in, the top of the workforce improvement, and especially around that intersectional approach, and that across race, culture, sexual orientation. It's just, it's important and it's needed. MacKenzie, when we're talking about the corporate culture and about women in leadership, can we please talk about this idea of women in leadership and this masculine, this sort of masculine form, right? Like, it's like if the woman's got to be a power hungry, dominating, masculine energy woman in leadership. And it's like, can we please reshape that narrative? Like, can we have women who are balanced in their feminine and masculine energy, but definitely owning their feminine, compassionate, caring, kind, genuine, relatable, authentic, which I feel like you embody so much of? Can we have this conversation about the need to change that narrative?
You mean it's a problem when we're portrayed who wears Prada all the time?
Come on.
You got your shoulder pads.
Exactly. High heels and exactly.
And you're climbing on people to get to the top. Ridiculous. Also, no one that's ever stepped on anyone should ever be promoted, right?
Right. Yes.
Your job as a leader is to lift people up. So yes. And it's it is the balance. I hate it when you show strength and it's seen at, oh, she's so demanding. Right. And it's well, I have high expectations for myself and for you. And those high expectations are going to help us all rise. And I am all about embracing. And I think that's been another kind of fun thing of this work from home, is that who we are is so much more present. And just there. And there's also this fine balance, because I love the feminism and I love bringing that in. But there can also be a level of expectation that you look at, right? And there's some other statistic, and this number will be wrong, but women spend 3 years of their life getting ready that men don't spend. And so how are you which I think goes back to that authentic self, right? I don't have to have perfectly one-toned makeup on.
Right.
And to bring my A game, right? Somehow men with red noses have been getting it done for centuries, it's, it's totally okay.
Yes.
And I think, bringing the best of what is women too, we're so good at collaboration and empathy. And yes, showing that side, people respond well to humanity. And showing that you care is very different from showing that you're incompetent. Perfectly competent and very caring and take you all the way to the top, right? Those are the people we want as leaders. inspire you and, love you. Ralph Roberts at Comcast is, a legend.
Mm-hmm.
And he was this amazing guy who treated everybody like family, even as he grew an empire.
Mm-hmm.
And women can bring that too and still be very strong and competent.
Yes.
So I love that you bring that up.
Yeah.
And I do have a jacket with shoulder pads that and I do sort of like wearing it sometimes, like
gotta get. I love it. It helps to accentuate the waistline.
Yes, exactly. And that becomes very thin. But what I don't understand is why we're not like, if I'm going to wear a jacket with shoulder pads, then I also want to wear comfortable loafers.
Can we please? Yes. Comfortable shoes? Can we? Yeah. I'm all about Clark, let me tell you.
I also haven't really had shoes on in a year, so that's interesting to see.
Oh my gosh. Joanna has joined us. Hi, Joanna. So good to see you. She has a really great question here. So the company that she works for has a policy which gives new mothers and fathers time off when they have a new baby. This also reaches to same-sex couples, and she's lucky about this. What are your thoughts about workplaces that don't have this type of policy?
Yeah, I think that parental leave is a must. And I think we need to keep leading in or family leave, really, right? Because there's also care for elderly parents. That's a very real challenge. Like, it's not necessarily just all about bringing kids in. It's what events,
yes,
forever, but are very impactful in the moment. And how do we care for people? Mm-hmm. And I would say vote with your feet. Right? Like, if your company doesn't have that, start looking for companies that do, so that it becomes more and more clear that talent goes to where, having that space is valued. And one of the things that I think is interesting, you do also, going back to having a child, see a lot of policies that say the primary caregiver versus the secondary, and they offer two different times, right? If you're the primary, you get more. If you're the secondary, you get less. And I really think it needs to be equal. Because I think that that's just another way, again, to devalue women. Like, look, they're the primaries, so they're going to take 4 months off. But male counterparts, same title, are going to have a child, and they're only going to take 2 weeks because, they can get back to work. So then that imbalance puts that stigma again on the people that are the primary parent. And I also see it, I'm huge on honesty, and I see it creating rifts too, where, there's a lot of knowledge that, hey, maybe you aren't the primary parent, but you took the primary parent leave. And like, can we just like take that ethical issue off the table?
God, yes.
Everybody the same amount of leave and say, the investment's worth it, because that was, it's dads are just as important. Or, if you've got two moms or two dads, both parents are just as important for that child. Yes, if you are the mother that actually gave birth, your body did go through a lot of trauma, and that is part of.
But you need all the support you can get in all of that time. Like, let's be honest, you need support.
Yes.
Right.
And like, I want a year for everybody, but even if you gave us 6 months to each parent, that's a year of the child's life, where the child with a parent, and cool for that kid, to that experience too.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. I want to ask your opinion about something, because I hear this a lot in the workforce around, don't take things personally, or it's not personal. Right. And for me, that doesn't sit quite right. Like, to me, that feels very masculine. It feels like a masculine statement that has acculturated, right? The corporate culture, just dominated. And because for me, and I think as a woman, what we do, is like, we bring ourselves to it. It's we're very connected to the work that we do. What are your thoughts with that? Because I hear that a lot in the corporate world about not taking things personally. And it's like, ooh, I don't know that that's quite the right thing to be saying.
Yeah, I think that the way that I would phrase it is take things, it's almost like you need to make sure that you understand the spectrum of impact. And I'm not coming up with like the right word, but it's personal.
Yeah.
Everything that happens, your career is a very personal thing. You have personal connections at work, right? We need to recognize that.
Right.
But where I also do see women trip up a lot is they get feedback and they shut down. And that's where I would say, like, and you're right, don't take it personally isn't the right thing, because this was feedback about your person. Right? But it was not designed to shut you down, designed to make you better. Right. And that is one thing where we're too often in our heads. And to be successful, you have to have this degree of resilience and this ability to say, I hear you and I get it. And here's what I'm going to do to change. Or I hear you and you're totally wrong and I'm going to ignore that. You know, like, no, my ambition isn't a bad thing.
Right.
Yeah. No, actually, there are plenty of men whose career have progressed as fast as the track that I'm on. You know, like,
yeah,
so it's that balance. And I think that that's where we have to call it out. And I'm sure that after we are done with our interview, I'm going to think of exactly the right way to describe that. But
you let me know, and I'll just add it. I'll add it in the notes.
Add it in.
Yeah. Let's get it out there. So as we're coming to a close here, what is your greatest hope of outcome with this talk, and what do you hope that it inspires others to do?
For me, my greatest hope is that we get to that 100 men and women.
Yes.
Because we are 50-50, right? Like,
right.
Around the planet. And we do it through retention. And we start to create these space and people start to tell their stories. And women like me come forward and say, that was GD hard. And you were so lucky that like I had to stick in it or I would have been out. Yeah. And here's what I want to do so that the next woman that has a baby doesn't have that same experience. Or if she does, and it goes back to the flexibility. Not everybody does need 6 months or a year of maternity leave. Like I said, is that like, we're like, okay, you know, I'm going to go back at week 10. Like, this was cool, I'm out. But some women do. And every is different. Every birth is different. And so at least giving that space and, why the year? And that's because the doctors in America and around the world say that the best thing to do is to breastfeed your baby for a year. And as long as you're breastfeeding your baby, these crazy hormones are happening to you. And that is just very real. And you also have a commitment to that child. And yes, you can pump, and work has done, I think, a really good job of making space for that. But it's incredibly awkward and tiring. And, you're just so overwhelmed. And so having that space, if you want it, to take it, and having society say, yep, we can support 1, 2, 3 years of one person's life for what they're going to contribute back in.
Right.
Just, super critical. And I'm hoping, that this talk sparks this, and that anyone listening, if you're struggling as well, that I can start to be a catalyst to support more women to stay in and just personally, for me, expand that mission.
Yes. I love that. MacKenzie, is there anything else you want to leave with our listeners tonight?
No, this has been a fabulous experience. I am so glad you've created this platform, and I would say go practice your guilty pleasure, whether that's a piece of chocolate or a glass of wine or a bubble, and like take that feeling and wake up with it tomorrow morning. And yourself in that same feeling, that same joy as you walk into work, because you spend a lot of time at work, and having it be a joy and a guilty pleasure and the thing that you do to fill you up so that you can then go fill your family up. Nothing better. Nothing.
Oh, I love that. Yes. So great, MacKenzie. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Is there a way for people to connect with you if they want to?
Yes. So I'm on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Those are all the best places to find me. Probably LinkedIn being the easiest. MacKenzie Roebuck Walsh. I was destined to be a CEO or my own private law firm with my name.
I mean, you really were. I'm like, this name is impressive.
That is the best way to track me down. And I would love to connect with anybody that's listening.
All right. Thanks so much for being here tonight, MacKenzie, and pulling you away from Cash, her 18-month-old little boy.
He's awesome.
So great. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom tonight. And thanks everyone for joining us. And I'll look forward to seeing you all join me again for the next episode of Meant for More Conversations. And everyone have a great rest of the week. And I'm definitely going to take that with me about thinking, how can I create a feeling of my guilty pleasure as I'm waking up tomorrow morning, starting my work day? I love that. So be inspired, be empowered. Everyone have a great week, and we'll see you all later. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.